Militias in the middle of Lyon. No, they're not militias. They're protests. Protests in France over immigration. Now, we've seen this over the past decade or so, and there have been many protests. Well, let me just say, France and protests like bread and butter. So no one's really surprised when there are protests, but you combine this with the victories of right-wing parties, anti-immigration parties, as well as the riots in Dublin, and the news coming out around this, and it's looking like a trend. So the other day, we talked quite a bit about what was going on in France and in Dublin, and we have some updates because the media is oh so angry about this. The narratives don't fly anymore. They're trying to claim it's the far right. But I've got some stats for you. When you see the quote-unquote far right becoming the plurality and becoming large portions of the populations of popular sentiment, you cannot call them fringe or far right anymore, can you? That's the goal of the far left. That's what we see in the United States. And that's what the far left has done. They try to argue every day that they are centrists. I kid you not. I was talking to a dude I know who's a socialist, and he said that I was far right and he was a centrist. That's the game they're trying to play. But let me just explain this. And then we'll talk about what's happening with these anti-immigration protests happening in France and what's going on with Dublin. I think when you look at the stats, let me just pull this up, where Europe's far right has gained ground, when you can see that 59%, 35%, 30%, when you look at these countries, how can you call them far right if in some instances they're the majority of the population? They wouldn't be far anything unless by your standards. And this is what we have. What we learn from all of this is that the American corporate press and European press are actually far left. Why? If you are calling the majority and the plurality, if you are calling popular sentiment fringe, it's actually just a representation of who you are and how far away you are from everyone else. About, what are we looking at? 5 years ago, there was this data that came out we covered showing that woke progressivism made up about 8 to 10% of the U.S. population. That means if you are woke, you are as far left as possible in this country, yet they would call moderates far right. And they have a disproportionate amount of access to media, and we're going to break that all down right now. For those that are concerned about immigration, this is very, very good news. It would have been, things were way different several years ago, way different. But let's first start with what's going on in France, because this has been ongoing. This is from actu.fr. Now, the surprising thing is, I've got videos of the marches happening in France. The fascinating thing, it is very, very difficult to find any news reporting on it. Now, when you pull up protests against immigration bill from several months ago, news outlets have been writing about it. But now that you have this story where an immigrant is accused of stabbing and killing a white teenager and saying that they were there to stab white people, and you have protests over this, media's mum. When it was right-wing groups protesting laws, they all write about it. When an immigrant is accused of killing a teenager before being white, the media shuts up. This is the game they play. They don't want people to know what's actually going on. So let me just say, what I do, look, what happens, happens. And I've always felt this. If an immigrant kills a white kid for being white, the people should know about it. I think it's important to say one story right here, in and of itself, does not warrant, I would argue, mass political changes. However, one story combined with stats and dozens of other stories, now you've got a pattern. And if people are looking at that and they're saying, okay, maybe we should consider some restrictions, that's on the people of France and not on me. But this is the game they play in the United States with the election integrity, the EIC, Election Integrity Commission, or whatever, or was it EIP? And the federal government. Me simply telling you a thing, they have to try and shut down. The media is not supposed to report on things that could change public sentiment in a direction the powers that be do not like. Now, this story that I have pulled up for you is French, and it was translated to English, so probably something's lost in translation. But here's what they say. Militias in the middle of Lyon. I just want to point out, no, not a militia. Come to the United States. We'll talk about militias. Far-right activists demonstrated in the streets of Lyon on Monday, despite the prefecture's ban on demanding justice for Thomas. There were 8 arrests. That's right. The story is an immigrant showed up to a party, I believe it was several, said they were there to stab white people, stabbed people, and killed a teenager. And according to this report, they had a ban on these protests. You're not allowed to protest, they say. Over 100 far-right activists demonstrated in the streets of Lyon Monday evening, despite a prefectural ban for claimed justice for Thomas, the 16-year-old teenager killed by a stabbing at a village party in Drum. Between 100 and 150 people gathered in city center in the first and second, arrondissement. Is that a district? According to the Rhone prefecture. The procession paraded shortly before 8 p.m. on Place des Terreaux. Jacobins, and is that what it says? Really, Jacobins? And in the shopping artery du Rue de la République, Route Republic. Justice for Thomas, Islam outside of Europe, immigration kills. You could read on banners and slogans. French, wake up, you're at home. Also chanted the ultra-right members. Oh yeah, ultra-right. The rally was called by a group, Les Remparts, elected officials and activists of Reconquest, the party of Eric Zemmour. So here are some of the videos we have. Actually, I have this tweet from Andy No. He says, following the stabbing murder of a French teen allegedly by Algerian youths in a southern French village, protesters gathered in Lyon to protest against immigration and Islam. Here they shout, French, wake up. This is your home here. Now, I did mention this a little bit yesterday, but I want to make sure it's in this context. Okay. In the United States, you have the far left claiming that they're supporting indigenous rights. You have pro-Palestine activists saying the people of Palestine are the true owners of the land and Palestine shall be free. It's like, okay, shall France be free? Honest question. Okay, if the people who are coming to France are not the original landowners and they're killing people, wow. The far left must view the Algerians accused of killing these teens the same as they view the Israelis. What's that? They don't? Well, gee whiz, gee golly. What could that possibly mean? Why is it that in the United States, they say they're for indigenous people's rights? In Canada, they say First Nations people, and they defend their rights. And then when it comes to Europe, it's the inverse. Pro-immigration. Well, hold on. Now, hold on there a minute. These people in France that are protesting are the indigenous population who are upset they are facing what they would describe as active colonization. In which case, wouldn't the left be in favor of what these people are protesting and calling for an end to colonization? The reality is these people don't really care about any of the ideology they claim to care about, and this is proof. What they care about is attacking white, cis, heteronormative patriarchy. There's a viral video, it's quite humorous, of a trans non-binary person, I believe it's a female with male hormones and a mastectomy, saying that they're reading the Quran, and it's so amazing how much Islam really helps them understand the world. It's just fascinating. Anything that opposes white Christian culture, that's the real issue. And you know what? I got no problem if they want to say that. That's fine. Just say it. Which brings us to where things are getting really interesting. Let me play some of these videos for you. I think that's only fair so that you can get a general understanding if you speak French. Here we go. Loud, angry individuals. And it's only going to get bigger because a kid died. It's only going to get bigger. But first, let's talk about the stats. Where Europe's far right has gained ground, one of the things I find really fascinating is the Swedish Democrats. This group, it's really, really funny. The Swedish Democrats are basically like center left by American standards, but they're anti-immigration and anti-Islam, so they're called far right. How does that make sense, right? We had a caller last night who said, if you're for free market capitalism, they're going to call you far right. And I said, no, that's incorrect. If you are a free market capitalist who believes in, that the companies can do whatever they want, but you support Islam, you support transgenderism and things like this, they will call you left. There you go. You can be a communist and say you don't care for the gender ideology and you don't like Islam, and they will call you MAGA or right wing. That's the funny way this works, isn't it? Now, I do find this fascinating. You can see, of course, Eastern Europe, Italy is not surprising to see that you have the rise of this political party. And Lampedusa, this island, has, I believe it's now more illegal immigrant than actual resident of the island. That's colonization. That's it. You're done. Your way of life is gone. I love it. You get these people talking about, the European conquistadors, the Spanish conquistadors and the colonizers came and they disrupted the way of life for the Native Americans. And aren't you mad? And it's like, yeah, we are. We recognize those things were pretty bad. And that's why we don't want them to happen again to us. Here's what I find fascinating. The place that this is going. Europe's far-right populists buoyed by Wilder's win in Netherlands, hoping the best is yet to come. That's right. If ever the hard right in Europe needed a set of jumper cables to rev up their electoral engine again, in the wake of last month's major setback in Poland, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands provided it. No, hold on. If the dude's winning, it looks like they've had momentum already. So they don't need anything to rev their engines up. The dude won. I don't know what else to tell you. Congratulations rolled in Thursday from all sides where the far right holds some sway on the continent after anti-Islam firebrand Wilders scored an election victory as unexpected as it was massive. His party more than doubled in size in parliament to tower over mainstream parties that long specialized in marginalizing him. Suddenly on Thursday, there was hope in the air again for nationalist conservative populists, especially with an European Parliament election coming up in June. You want to know why this is fascinating? Nationalist conservative populists. Well, that's weird. Why aren't they saying white nationalists? Why are they saying nationalist populists? The language is changing. This is what I brought up yesterday, and it's a good point. Danny Polishuk said, as soon as Elon buys Twitter, people said men aren't women. I want you to understand the way culture was being shaped. We are winning. We are forwarding the line. It does not mean we own the battlefield. It does not mean we've scored a touchdown. We are forwarding the line. We have begun to gain ground, and significantly. 6 years ago, you could not have these stories. Calling groups marching against immigration, calling for the banning of mosques. They would say fascist, neo-Nazi, white nationalists. Some still are, of course. But that language is starting to fade out. Why? These corporations, these companies just want to make money. And when they start to see the majority population, or day by day, the average person says no to the far left policies, they know who butters their bread. And that's changing everything. So when we do a Culture War episode, the Culture War podcast, Friday mornings, 10 a.m. on Tenet Media, and I bring in a pro athlete or whatever, it's fascinating. What I hear is, I used to hear this. I've talked to pro athletes, and I'd say like, I'll put it this way. I'm a skateboarder. I've got some pretty good clips people are rather enjoying. And people, pro skaters have hit me up being like, I'm a big fan. I love what you do, but I can't speak out because I'll lose my job. I'll lose everything. And I'm like, well, that's a damn shame, because the only way to reverse this is if you do speak out and speak up and shift the narrative. And now, what are we starting to see? More and more pro athletes, cultural figures are speaking up and speaking out and saying, shut up, dude. We just don't care anymore. Now, it is not necessarily that the bravery of these individuals is paving the way for more people to speak up. It is true for some people who were speaking up very early on, and they lost their jobs and they were banned because of it. But because of those who paved their own path through the wilderness, others can follow that road with ease and without fear. And what we're seeing now, more and more people are able to speak up and say, you know, I have very serious concerns about unfettered, unchecked immigration. What's happening in Europe, if we don't get a hold on this immigration at the southern border, it's going to come to here. Some people have said if it can happen in Europe, it can happen here. No, it is happening in Europe. It will happen here. Here we go from Financial Times. The far right is moving into Europe's mainstream. I'm sorry, I just want to point this out again. If you make up the majority, you are not far right. You're the majority. You're the average. You can go, and this is the point I made the other day. You can go much further right than anything we've seen. Let me show you some stories. I think it's here. Look at this. France's anti-immigration far right gets boost from riots over police killing of teen. This is from July 12th. We've been seeing more and more of the sentiment. But I do have some stories. Swedish Prime Minister rebukes far right leader who said mosques should be flattened. Now, I don't trust their phrasing. For all we know, this guy did not say that, but maybe he did. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has condemned far-right Sweden Democrats leader Jimmy Åkesson for saying mosques should be demolished, calling the statement disrespectful. Åkesson came under fire on Saturday for saying that Sweden should ban the establishment of new mosques while suggesting it should also demolish existing ones in the country. We also need to start confiscating and demolishing mosque buildings where anti-democratic, anti-Swedish, homophobic, anti-Semitic propaganda or general disinformation about Swedish society is spreading. Very different. They want to make it seem like this guy came out and just said, destroy mosques. What he said was where anti-democratic, anti-Swedish, homophobic, and anti-Semitic propaganda. Now, this is the funny thing. Wait, what? This guy's targeting conservative religious institutions. It's anti-Islam, yes. But he's specific in what he's calling for. Demolishing mosques where they're engaged in, and effectively what he would say is anti-Swedish propaganda. It's very specific. I don't agree. I think people have a right to free speech, and you're allowed to say what you want to say. It's a bit different from him just saying flatten mosques. But the sentiment is on the rise. And I believe if we do not get a hold on immigration, we will see not the same thing. I don't think, I don't think it'll be Islam, but we have very serious problems with border security. There's a story, I think it was out of Arizona. A bunch of illegal immigrants kept crossing this guy's property. Eventually, he shot and killed some. He's been arrested. Now, why would he do that? I think there's a reasonable, and I think the reasonable and simple solution is this guy felt threatened for some reason by these particular migrants that he opened fire on. He was on his own property defending his land from what he perceived to be a threat. It's possible. He was sick and tired of the non-citizens entering his property, and so he just opened fire. I don't see that as being realistic. I just don't see it as being realistic. I think the simple solution would be he was threatened. These are cartels, smugglers, and human traffickers. Not all of them, but many of them. Something happened. But you know what? He's in jail. They're trying to lock him up. This is what you get from the media machine. The crazy thing to me are these videos in the United States of the federal government breaking the law. It's crazy. Texas got an injunction because they put up razor wire to block illegal immigrants, and the federal government snips the razor wire and lifts it up to allow non-citizens into the country. How is this happening? Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. You are going to get massive protests like this. It's just going to keep happening. We've had these protests for some time. This is from October. Protesters take to the streets of Paris against immigration law and housing crisis. France faces deteriorating situation where working classes are most affected by housing crisis. And they keep letting non-citizens in. Eventually, it all comes crumbling down. Conor McGregor has been speaking up about this. They claim far-right looting. Do we have this? Here we go. How the rise of the far-right in Ireland provoked the Dublin riots. And some of the reporting is trying to suggest that the looting was from the people who are opposing immigration. It's not. Conor McGregor tweets, deplorable. We stand with Irish businesses. Criminal migrants taking full advantage of the protests in Dublin. And you have this post from Conor McGregor. Despicable scenes last night in Dublin city centre. People looting shops amidst the anger and rage Ireland has for the many failed policies of the government. Has the regime ever had even one successful policy? Health services in shambles. Abominable housing crisis. Is that the right word? Immigration wide open. Climate hypocrisy rubbed in our faces. Danger on our streets. Crime at an all-time high. Can we point to any successes? And you have people who... Now, here's the interesting thing. This is where things, I think, can start to get dangerous. Two men seen in photos. Looting. Not white. These people could have been born in Ireland. Just because they're not white does not mean they are immigrants. The assumption is it is non-native Irish who are doing the looting. And what's going to start to happen is, with the Washington Post pushing their lies, where they said they claimed it was an immigrant, but it turns out it was a citizen who had lived there for 20 years. And everyone's like, wait. He's 50, but he only lived there for 20 years, so he's an immigrant. You see what they're doing. Eventually, what's going to happen, and this has already happened in Sweden, people who are born in these places from immigrants are going to be viewed as outsiders and immigrants. That's Sweden. And this is where bad things happen, because what do you do for a person who is born in your country but is not like native, indigenous, Irish, or Swedish? Problems happen. In Sweden, they say the immigrants are causing all of this crime. Fascinating thing I learned. They're not. Swedish citizens were causing the crime. That's right. People who were born in Sweden and were Swedish, but whose parents came from Somalia or other countries. And therein lies the big challenge. These young men are treated like immigrants in the press and in Swedish society, but they can't go anywhere else because they're not from anywhere else. This is the problem being caused by these failed policies. Hey, I love legal immigration. I really do. You can be a black man and be Irish. You, in fact, can. Because listen, there are a lot of people who are going to make arguments about chain migration and things like this. But I want to make sure we're clear here. There are people in Britain who are black and whose families have been there for hundreds of years. And if you're like 8th or 9th generation black British, it is unfair to say you're not. Now, of course, I understand when people are talking about ethnically British, there's a difference, right? They're white. But I want to make sure we're careful on this. We don't want to enter a world where just because you look a certain way, you are presumed to have no rights. And the answer to this is you can't have unchecked migration the way Italy, the way France, the way Ireland is handling it. You cannot just bus foreign workers and fighting age males, military age males into the country, lest you end up with race conflict. It's the warning I've made several years ago. In the United States, if they keep going this route of attacking white people, insulting white people, blaming whiteness, there are these videos of these women on TikTok just spewing racial slurs. They're disgusting people. Disgusting. Oh, did we get a video going? I think Twitter just decided they were going to start playing the Andy No video again. But here's my point. If young white men just want to be left alone, just want to play video games, want to live a life, be happy, but they go on TikTok, they go on Instagram, and what do they hear? Insults based on their race. You will be dealing with majority populations in these countries that are going to say, fine, so be it. I come from a mixed race family. You want to know why I hate the left, the woke left? Because they're racial identitarians. In their world, I'm a second-class citizen. And that's why I bring it up. In their world, my parents would never have gotten together. Derek Bell, one of the founding fathers of critical race theory, thought that schools should remain segregated. And the critical race theorists in the woke still maintain this position. In 1967, the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional to bar people of different races from cohabitating, marrying, and having kids. Believe it or not, in most of the country, it was illegal. If you were white and your wife was black, you could not share a home, and your children were insulted and mocked. You were insulted and mocked both. It's crazy. Crazy to think about, right? I mean, come on. I know a lot of people, don't like the mixed race commercials and they complain about it. But even when it comes to trans individuals, the overwhelming majority of people on the right are not going to insult, bother, belittle a person simply on the basis of being trans when they see them in public. Now, they may express their opinions online in a general sense, and they may be mocking or insulting. But for the most part, even Ben Shapiro says if he saw Blair White in public, he would use she, her pronouns because it's just too complicated to try and explain to someone that Blair White is biologically male. So for the sake of simplicity, but in writings online in the general or academic sense, Ben says he will use he, him pronouns. It's a complicated process. It is. But the average conservative is going to be like, dude, whatever, man, live your life. I don't like it. I'll speak up against it, but I'm not going to bother you. You can do your thing. Where we don't want to go is where you box people into a corner, beat them down, insulting them, being racist until they finally say, okay, that's it. It's time to enforce. It's time to begin enforcing our moral laws. It's time to bring back some kind of Christian moral framework hard into the law. And that's a reality I think is, I don't know if classical liberalism can maintain this system, because classical liberalism operates under the presumption that others are operating in good faith with their differing views. And when we say live and let live, you believe that these individuals will return the favor. But it only goes so far, until eventually you end up with the woke left demanding racial segregation, and they are, insulting people based on race, they do it every day, and then trying to literally just attack and get people fired based on their race. In the UK, they have something called BAME, Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic. That means jobs will say BAME only. You want to apply for a job and you're a native Brit? Nope. Now, here's the crazy thing. What if you're a 9th generation Black British citizen? Your family is there for whatever reason. Maybe it was slavery, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was colonization, and then people came. You have known nothing but being British. Your parents know nothing but being British. Their grandparents know nothing but being British. And now all of a sudden, you've got this conflict between races. And you and your friends are like, bro, we're all British. We grew up here. Yeah. So here's my warning. Eventually, you will end up with race riots. And I think we probably already did with Black Lives Matter. You can call it that. And when I bring this up to the woke left, they act like it's so shocking. It's so shocking to think. It's going to be really interesting when you, as a white liberal, go to one of these BLM rallies and you get attacked for it. It's already happened. Friends of mine, far left, no longer, said that they went to these rallies and they were attacked for being white. They were told, F off, white bitch, things like that. When I went to Milwaukee and I was just filming, you had black people screaming, get the white people. And I'm like, wow, man, that's crazy. There are videos of this. An 18-year-old white kid took a 22 to the neck in one of these protests. I hate to see it, man. I really do think it's great if we can all learn to live together. But the left, the policies they're engaging in, they're basically pitting race against race because they're racist and it's what they want. People are starting to push back. And I hope the end result is a more classically liberal but strong nationalist system that we see in Europe, where they just say immigration's fine if controlled properly. Criminals must be held accountable. And we put an end to these far left policies. We'll see, man. This is going to keep happening, and I think we're going to see more. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.